Hello, fifth grade. We're about to start chapter 8, but before we do, I want to have a couple reminders with you. First of all, some language pops up in this chapter, and remember we talked about that. We're just going to blow past it. I'm going to use a substitute phrase instead, so we're just going to let that go. Second, there are some sensitive topics in here, so I would encourage you to talk to your parents about that. Remember that the characters are all going to have different ideas about this topic. So when an author wants to explore a topic, they will often write several different perspectives from several different characters. Characters are often in a conflict about these topics or disagreement with each other, and it's really up to you, the reader, to decide who you agree with. Or maybe you agree with all of them a little bit, or maybe you don't agree with any of them. So that's really a judgment call for you, the reader, to make. All right, be thinking about that as we read chapter 8. Easter. Even though it was nearly Easter, there were still very few nights that it was warm enough to leave Miss Bessie out. And then there was the rain. All March it poured. For the first time in many years, the creek had held water, not just a trickle either, enough so that when they swung across it, it was a little scary looking down water below. Jess took Prince Tyrion across inside his jacket, but the puppy was growing so fast he might pop the zipper any time and fall into the water and drown. And remember, this is Jess's big fear. We learned that after Leslie's scuba diving essay that she read. Jess said it was so descriptive that he nearly drowned. Ellie and Brenda were already fighting about what they were going to wear to church. Since Mama got mad at the preacher 3 years back, Easter was the only time of the year that the Aaronses went to church, and it was a big deal. Let's listen to find out why it's a big deal to Jess Aaron's family that they go to church on Easter. His mother always cried poor, but she put a lot of thought and as much money as she could scrape together into making sure she wouldn't be embarrassed by how her family looked. So ask yourself, are the Aaronses going to church because it's important to them? Or do you think it could be something else? If you said something else, you're right. We can tell here that that mom at least only wants to go to church to impress people by the way they look. But the one day before she planned to take them all over to Millsburg Plaza for new clothes, his dad came home from Washington early. He had been laid off. No new clothes this year. Laid off means he lost his job. A wail went up from Ellie and Brenda like two sirens going to a fire. "You can't make me go to church," Brenda said. "I ain't got nothing to wear, and you know it." Oh my goodness. "Just because you're too fat," Maybelle muttered. "Did you hear what she said, Mama? I'm going to kill that kid." "Brenda, will you shut your mouth?" his mother said sharply. Then more wearily, "We got a lot more than Easter clothes to worry about." His dad got up noisily and poured himself a cup of black coffee from the pot on the back of the stove. "Why can't we charge some things?" That means put it on a credit card, Ellie said in her wheedling voice. Brenda burst in. "Do you know what some people do? They charge something and wear it and then take it back and say it didn't fit or something. The stores don't give them any trouble." Her father turned in a kind of roar. "I never heard such a fool thing in my life. Didn't you hear your mother tell you to shut your mouth, girl?" Well, happy Easter, everybody, right? This is not really the attitude going on in the house of a family who is getting ready to spend some quality time together and celebrate. Brenda stopped talking, but she popped her gum as loudly as she could just to prove she wasn't going to be put down. Jess was glad to escape to the shed, and then the complacent company of Miss Bessie. There was a knock. "Jess? Leslie, come in." She looked first and then sat on the floor near his stool. What's new? Lord, don't ask. He tugged the teats rhythmically and listened to the plink, plink, plink in the bottom of the pail. That's milk. That bad, huh? My dad's got laid off. And Brenda and Ellie are fit to fry because they can't have new clothes for Easter. Gee, I'm sorry about your dad, I mean. Jess grinned. Yeah, I ain't too worried about those girls. If I know them, they'll trick new clothes out of somebody. It would make you throw up to see how those girls made a spectacle of themselves in church. I never knew you went to church. Just Easter. He concentrated on the warm udders. I guess you think that's dumb or something? She didn't answer for a minute. I was thinking I'd like to go. He stopped milking. I don't understand you sometimes, Leslie. Well, I've never been to church before. It would be a new experience for me. He went back to work. You'd hate it. Why? Boring. Well, I'd just like to see for myself. Do you think your parents would let me go with you? You can't wear pants. That means she has to wear a dress. I've got some dresses, Jess errands. Would wonders never cease? Here, he said, open your mouth. Why? Just open your mouth. For once, she obeyed. He sent a stream of warm milk straight into it. Jess errands! The name was garbled, and the milk dribbled down her chin as she spoke. Don't open your mouth now. You're wasting good milk. Leslie started to giggle, choking and coughing. Now, if I could just learn to pitch a baseball that's straight. Let me try again. Leslie controlled her giggle, closed her eyes, and solemnly opened her mouth. But now Jess was giggling, so he couldn't keep his hand steady. You dunce! You got me right in the ear! Leslie hunched up her shoulder and rubbed her ear with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. She collapsed into giggles again. I'd be obliged if you'd finish milking and come on back to the house. His dad was standing right there at the door. I guess I'd better go, said Leslie quietly. She got up and went to the door. Excuse me. His dad moved aside to let her pass. Jess waited for him to say something more, but he just stood there for a few minutes and then turned and went out. Remember, Jess really wishes he had a relationship with Dad. He's been longing for hugs and time together and the opportunity to wrestle and play with Dad and impress him. Remember, even at Christmas time, he wanted so much to impress his dad. So knowing all of that, Jess waited for him to say something more. What might he have been waiting? Maybe hoping that Dad might say. Think about something positive or something that Jess would really wish his dad would say. You can tell me in the comments, or you can message me, or you can just turn and tell a parent. Ellie said she would go to church if Mama would let her wear the see-through blouse, and Brenda would go if she got at least a new skirt. In the end, everyone got something new except Jess and his dad. Neither of whom cared. But Jess got the idea it might give him a little bargaining power with his mother. Since I ain't getting anything new, could Leslie go to church with us? That girl? You could see his mother rooting around in her head for a good reason to say no. She don't dress right. Mama, his voice sounded as prissy as Ellie's. Leslie's got dresses. She's got hundreds of them. She's probably not got hundreds of them. His mother's thin face drooped. She bit the outside of her bottom lip in a way Joyce Ann sometimes did, and spoke so softly Jess could hear her. I don't want no one poking up their noses in my family. Jess wanted to put his arm around her the way he put it around Maybelle when she was in need of comfort. She don't poke her nose up at you, Mama. Honest. So the real reason she didn't want Leslie to go to church with them is because she didn't want Leslie to possibly judge them and judge the way that they dress. His mother sighed. Well, if she looks decent. Leslie looked decent. Her hair was kind of slicked down, and she wore a navy blue jumper over a blouse with tiny old-fashioned looking flowers. At the bottom of her red knee socks were a pair of shiny brown leather shoes that Jess had never seen before, as Leslie always wore sneakers like the rest of the kids at Lord Creek. Even her manner was decent. Her usual sparkle was toned way down. And she said yes'm and no'm to his mother, just as though she were aware of Mrs. Aarons's dread of disrespect. Jess knew how hard Leslie must be trying, for Leslie didn't say yes'm naturally. That's short for yes, ma'am, by the way. In comparison to Leslie, Brenda and Ellie looked like a pair of peacocks with fake tail feathers. They both insisted on riding in the front of the pickup with their parents, which was some kind of a squeeze with Brenda's shape to consider. Jess and Leslie and the little girls climbed happily into the back and sat down in the old sacks his dad had put against the cab. So remember, Leslie has never been to church. That means her family doesn't traditionally go to church. The Aarons family used to go a lot, and then Mom had a falling out with a pastor. Now they only go on Easter. But we learned that they only go to show off their new clothes and things like that. So the only person who's going to church because they really want to experience church is Leslie. The sun wasn't exactly shining, but it was the first day in so long that the rain wasn't actually coming down that they sang, "Oh Lord, what a morning," and "Ah, lovely meadows," and sing a song that Miss Edmonds had taught them, and even jingle bells for Joyce Ann. The wind carried their voices away from them. It made the music seem mysterious, which filled Jess with a feeling of power over the hills rolling out from behind the truck. The ride was too short, especially for Joyce Ann, who began to cry because the arrival interrupted the first verse of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. I know I sing that at Easter all the time. Which, after Jingle Bells, was her favorite song. Another Easter tradition. Jess tickled her to get her giggling again, so that when the four of them clambered down over the tailgate, they were flush-faced and happy once more. They were a little late, which didn't bother Ellie and Brenda, for it meant that they got to flounce down the entire length of the aisle to the first pew, making sure that every eye in the church was on them. And every expression of every eye was a jealous one. They wanted people to be jealous, or they were disgusting. And his mother had been scared Leslie might embarrass her. Jess hunched his shoulders and slunk into the pew after a string of women folk and just before his dad. Church always seemed the same. Jess could tune it out the way he tuned out school, with his body standing up and sitting down in unison with the rest of the congregation, but his mind numb and floating, not really thinking or dreaming, but at least free. Once or twice he was aware of being on his feet with a loud, not really tuneful singing all around. At the edge of his consciousness, he could hear Leslie singing along and drowsily wondered why she bothered. So Leslie's enjoying this. Jess isn't paying attention. And the girls, the older girls, only care that people are looking at them and jealous of their new clothes. But Leslie is really enjoying church. The preacher had one of those tricky voices. It would buzz along for several minutes quite comfortably, then bang! He was screaming at you. Each time Jess would jump, and it would take another couple of minutes to relax again, because he wasn't listening to the words. The man's red face, with sweat pouring down, seemed strangely out of place in the dull sanctuary. He should pay attention. It was like Brenda throwing a temper tantrum over Joyce Ann touching her lipstick. It took a while to get Ellie and Brenda pulled away from the front yard of the church. Jess and Leslie went ahead and put the little girls in the back and settled down to wait. This next conversation is a little sensitive. This conversation is the one I was telling you about, that there's a little bit of language and the topic is a little bit sensitive. So be sure to just not make a big deal about it when I substitute some of the words. And if you have any questions, you're free to talk to your parents about that. Gee, I'm really glad I came. Jess turned to Leslie in unbelief. It was better than a movie. You're kidding. No, I'm not. And she wasn't. He could tell by her face. That whole Jesus thing is really interesting, isn't it? What do you mean? All those people wanting to kill him when he hadn't done anything to hurt them. She hesitated. It's really kind of a beautiful story, like Abraham Lincoln or Socrates or Aslan. It ain't beautiful, Maybelle broke in. It's scary. Nailing holes right through somebody's hand? Maybelle's right. Jess reached down in the deepest pit of his mind. It's because we're all vile sinners. God made Jesus die. Do you think that's true? He was in shock. It's in the Bible, Leslie. She looked at him as if she were going to argue, then seemed to change her mind. It's crazy, isn't it? She shook her head. You have to believe it, but you hate it. I don't have to believe it, and I think it's beautiful. She shook her head again. It's crazy. Maybelle had her eyes all squinched as though Leslie was some strange creature in a zoo. You gotta believe the Bible, Leslie. Why? It was a genuine question. Leslie wasn't being smarty. Because if you don't believe the Bible, Maybelle's eyes were huge, God will send you away when you die. Where'd she ever hear a thing like that? Leslie turned on Jess as though she were about to accuse him of something that he had committed against his sister. He felt hot and caught by her voice and words. He dropped his gaze to the gunny sack and began to fiddle with his raveled edge. That's right, ain't it, Joss? Maybelle's shrill voice demanded. Doesn't God send you away if you don't believe in the Bible? Jess pushed his hair out of his face. I reckon, he muttered. I don't believe it. Leslie said, I don't even think you've read the Bible. I read most of it, Jess said, still fingering the sack. It's about the only book we get around our place. He looked up at Leslie and half grinned. She smiled. Okay, but I still don't think God goes around sending people away. They smiled at each other, trying to ignore Maybelle's anxious little voice. But Leslie, she insisted, what if you die? What's going to happen if you die? And that is the end of chapter 8.